The story of Clarence King, a renowned geologist during America's Gilded Age, is one of intrigue and secrecy. Despite being a friend of wealthy and powerful men, King carried a hidden identity for 17 years as James Todd, a black Pullman porter with a black wife and mixed-race children residing in Brooklyn. Martha A. Sandweiss chronicles King's extraordinary life in her book, relying on letters, newspaper accounts, and interviews to reveal the man who defied social conventions. King was an intellectual and adventurous individual who explored far-flung regions of the western U.S. and South America, developing an appreciation for non-Western culture and people. Despite his influential status, King was in constant need of money and relied on the generosity of his wealthy friends to support both of his families. He kept his secret hidden until he was close to death, unable to face the potential ruin of an interracial marriage. Ada Copeland was King's common-law wife, presumed to be born a slave in Georgia in 1860. She moved to New York in the mid-1880s and worked as a nursemaid. In 1887, she became involved with King, who presented himself to her as a light-skinned black Pullman porter under the name of James Todd. They married in September 1888, with King living as Todd with Copeland, but as Clarence King while working in the field. The couple had 5 children together, with 4 surviving into adulthood. Their 2 daughters married white men, and their 2 sons served classified as blacks during World War I. Before his death from tuberculosis in 1901, King confessed his true identity to Copeland in a letter. After King's death, Copeland fought for 30 years to gain control of the trust fund he had promised her. She was assisted by notable lawyers, including Everett J. Waring, the first black lawyer to argue a case before the Supreme Court of the United States, and J. Douglas Wetmore, who contested segregation laws in Jacksonville, Florida. In 1933, the court determined that King had died penniless, and no money was forthcoming. John Hay, a friend of King's, provided Copeland with a monthly stipend, and after his death in 1905, his daughter Helen Hay Whitney continued the support. The stipend eventually stopped, but Copeland continued to live in the house John Hay had bought for her until her death in 1964, making her one of the last former American slaves. Clarence King, a larger-than-life geologist with a secret identity. Clarence King was a legendary geologist, explorer, and friend to some of the wealthiest and most powerful men of his time. His intellect and wanderlust led him to survey the far-flung regions of the western United States and South America, and to develop an abiding appreciation of non-Western cultures and peoples. However, what his family and wealthy friends did not know was that for 17 years, King lived a double life as a black Pullman porter named James Todd, with a black wife and mixed-race children residing in Brooklyn. King's story is a fascinating one, and it was only revealed after his death. In her book, Passing Strange, A Gilded Age Tale of Love and Deception Across the Color Line, historian Martha A. Sandweiss chronicles the extraordinary life of this influential blue-eyed white man who passed for black at a time when passing generally went the other way. Sandweiss relied on letters, newspaper accounts, and interviews to piece together King's secret life and the challenges he faced as a man caught between 2 worlds. King's early life was marked by privilege and opportunity. Born in Newport, Rhode Island, in 1842, he was the son of a wealthy businessman who was active in politics and social circles. King attended prestigious schools and was encouraged to pursue his interests in science and exploration. He graduated from Yale in 1862 and soon embarked on a career as a geologist and explorer. King's achievements were many. He conducted the first systematic geological survey of the Sierra Nevada range in California, mapped the geology of the Great Basin, and explored the remote regions of the Colorado Plateau. His work brought him into contact with some of the most powerful men of his time, including railroad magnate E. H. Harriman, who financed King's expeditions. Despite his success, King was a restless and complicated man. He was devoted to his mother and half-siblings, but he struggled to support them financially. He was also deeply conflicted about his own identity. As a young man, he had a relationship with a black woman, Ada Copeland, who lived in Washington, D.C., and worked as a seamstress. This relationship had a profound impact on King and may have contributed to his decision to pass as black. King's double life began in the 1880s, when he met Ada's sister, Margaret, who lived in Brooklyn and was married to a black Pullman porter named James Todd. King began to spend time with Margaret and her family and eventually assumed the identity of James Todd himself. He maintained this secret identity for 17 years, even as he continued to travel and conduct geological surveys. He relied on the largesse of his wealthy friends to support both his white family and his black family. King's story is both fascinating and troubling. On the one hand, he defied social conventions and crossed racial boundaries in ways that were rare for a white man of his time. He also developed a deep appreciation for Black culture and the experiences of Black Americans. On the other hand, his decision to pass as Black was deeply deceptive and had significant consequences for his Black wife and children. He was unable or unwilling to face the potential ruin of an interracial marriage and instead chose to maintain his secret identity until his death. In the end, King's story is a complex and compelling one, and it sheds light on the complex racial dynamics of the Gilded Age. As Sandweiss notes, King's story underscores the fact that identity is always constructed, always a matter of negotiation and choice, and that race is a powerful determinant of those negotiations. Clarence King was a larger-than-life figure who lived an extraordinary life, but his legacy is a complicated one. He was a man who defied social conventions but also failed to live up to his own ideals. King's story also highlights the importance of understanding the historical context in which he lived. The late 19th century was a time of rapid change and upheaval in the United States, as the country grappled with issues of race, class, and identity. King's decision to pass as Black was not only a personal choice, but also reflected the larger tensions of his time. In the end, King's story is a reminder of the complexity of human identity and the ways in which race continues to shape our lives and our perceptions of the world around us. It is a story that challenges us to confront our own assumptions and biases and to recognize the power of race in shaping our individual and collective experiences. Despite the challenges and controversies of his life, Clarence King remains an important figure in the history of geology and exploration. His work helped to expand our understanding of the natural world, and his legacy continues to inspire new generations of scientists and explorers. But his story also reminds us of the importance of confronting our past and acknowledging the ways in which race has shaped our world. By doing so, we can begin to build a more just and equitable future for all. King's story also raises important questions about identity and privilege. As a wealthy, educated white man, King had access to opportunities and resources that were denied to many people of color. Yet he chose to pass as Black, taking advantage of the relative freedom that came with that identity. This raises complex questions about the ethics of passing and the ways in which privilege and power shape our choices and identities. Moreover, King's story challenges us to think about the ways in which race is constructed and performed. As Sandweiss notes, King's passing was not a matter of physical appearance, but rather a matter of social identity. He carefully crafted his persona as James Todd, adopting the speech patterns and mannerisms of a Black man. This raises important questions about the ways in which race is performed and how individuals negotiate their identities in a society that often places rigid boundaries around race and ethnicity. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in King's story, as scholars and activists seek to uncover the hidden histories of people of color who passed as white or vice versa. King's story challenges us to think about the ways in which race and identity are intertwined, and how individuals navigate the complexities of those identities in a society that is often deeply divided along racial lines. In the end, King's legacy is a complex and multifaceted one. He was a brilliant scientist and explorer, but also a man who lived a double life and struggled to reconcile his conflicting identities. His story challenges us to confront our own assumptions and biases about race, identity, and privilege, and to recognize the ways in which these issues continue to shape our world today.